What happens when one of the biggest superstars in the world sits down for what should be a routine interview, only to face a host determined to tear her down on live television? Today, we're diving into the explosive confrontation that left Jennifer Lopez walking off set and Meghan Kelly scrambling to save face. This is the story of how a simple promotional interview turned into one of the most dramatic moments in daytime television history. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below because this story will blow your mind. Jennifer Lopez arrived at the studio that morning expecting nothing more than another standard interview to promote her latest project. She had done thousands of these over her decades-long career, from talk shows to red carpets, always maintaining her professional composure, even when faced with difficult questions. The plan was simple: discuss her new album, touch on some upcoming film projects, maybe share a personal anecdote or two, and wrap up in 20 minutes. What she didn't expect was to encounter a host who seemed more interested in creating controversy than conducting journalism. Meghan Kelly had been struggling with ratings lately, and her producers had been pressuring her to generate more buzz around her show. The daytime television landscape was more competitive than ever, and Kelly knew she needed something big to get people talking. When Jennifer Lopez was booked as a guest, Kelly saw an opportunity. She had spent the previous evening researching every possible angle, every past controversy, every sensitive topic she could use to push buttons and create viral moments. The interview started innocently enough. Lopez entered the studio looking radiant as always, her signature smile lighting up the room as she greeted the audience. She wore a stunning cream-colored blazer that perfectly complemented her glowing skin, her hair styled in loose waves that caught the studio lights beautifully. The audience erupted in applause as she made her way to the guest chair, waving graciously and blowing kisses to her fans who had gathered to watch the taping. Kelly began with the standard pleasantries, welcoming Lopez to the show and thanking her for taking the time to appear. But those who knew Kelly well could sense something different in her demeanor. There was a sharpness in her eyes, a subtle tension in her smile that suggested she had an agenda beyond the typical celebrity interview format. "Jennifer, it's wonderful to have you here," Kelly said, her voice carrying that practiced television warmth that barely concealed something more calculating underneath. "You look absolutely stunning as always." "Thank you so much for having me, Meghan," Lopez replied, settling into her chair with the ease of someone who had done this dance countless times before. "I'm really excited to be here and talk about all the amazing projects I have coming up." "Yes, let's talk about those projects," Kelly said, glancing down at her notes with what appeared to be casual interest. "But first, I have to ask about something that's been making headlines recently." Lopez's smile remained intact, but those closest to her could see the subtle shift in her posture. In the entertainment industry, the phrase "making headlines" was rarely followed by anything pleasant during an interview setting. "Of course," Lopez said diplomatically, "I'm happy to address whatever questions you might have." Kelly leaned forward slightly, her journalist instincts taking over as she prepared to pounce. "There have been some reports about your personal life. Some suggestions that perhaps your public image doesn't always match your private behavior. How do you respond to critics who say you've become disconnected from your roots, from the community that first supported you?" The question hit Lopez like a slap across the face. This wasn't journalism. This was a calculated attack disguised as legitimate inquiry. Lopez had faced difficult questions before, but there was something particularly venomous about the way Kelly had phrased this, something designed not to inform, but to humiliate. "I'm not sure what you're referring to specifically," Lopez replied, her voice remaining steady despite the obvious provocation. "I've always been proud of where I come from, and I work very hard to give back to my community whenever possible." Kelly wasn't satisfied with this measured response. She had come prepared for battle, and she wasn't going to let Lopez off the hook so easily. "But surely you can understand why some people might feel that way. I mean, when was the last time you were actually in the Bronx? Not for a photo opportunity or a charity event, but just as Jenny from the block." The condescension in Kelly's voice was unmistakable now. She had deliberately used Lopez's famous nickname in a mocking tone, turning what had once been a badge of authenticity into a weapon of ridicule. The studio audience began to shift uncomfortably in their seats, sensing that something was going terribly wrong with what should have been a light-hearted celebrity interview. Lopez took a deep breath, her media training kicking in, as she tried to navigate this unexpected minefield. "Meghan, I think there might be some misunderstanding here. I visit my family and friends regularly, and I'm constantly involved in charitable work in underserved communities, not just in New York, but around the world. Right. But that's exactly what I'm talking about, Kelly pressed on, her voice taking on an even more aggressive edge. Everything you do now seems calculated, staged for maximum publicity benefit. When you do visit these communities, it's always with cameras rolling, always with press releases announcing your good deeds. Don't you think that's a little manipulative? The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Lopez felt her carefully maintained composure beginning to crack. This wasn't journalism. This was character assassination. And it was happening in front of a live studio audience and television cameras that would broadcast this moment to millions of viewers. I find that question incredibly unfair, Lopez said, her voice growing firmer as her famous temper began to surface. When you're in the public eye, everything you do gets scrutinized and photographed. That doesn't mean the charitable work isn't genuine, or that the love for my community isn't real. Kelly sensed blood in the water and decided to push even harder. She had Lopez on the defensive now, exactly where she wanted her. But let's be honest about what we're really talking about here. You've built an empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars by essentially selling a fantasy version of yourself to the public. The whole Jenny from the block persona, isn't that just marketing? A way to maintain relatability while living a lifestyle that's completely removed from the reality of ordinary people. The question was so loaded with malicious intent that even the studio crew began to look uncomfortable. This had moved far beyond legitimate journalism into the realm of personal attack, and everyone in the room could feel the tension rising to dangerous levels. Lopez stared at Kelly for a long moment, her dark eyes flashing with anger that she was struggling to contain. She had built her career on being professional, on never letting anyone see her lose control. But Kelly was testing every limit of her patience and dignity. "Meghan," Lopez said slowly, her voice carrying a warning that Kelly should have heeded. "I came here today to talk about my work, about projects that I'm passionate about and excited to share with people. I didn't come here to be ambushed with personal attacks disguised as interview questions." Kelly's response to Lopez's warning was perhaps the most telling moment of the entire encounter. Instead of backing down or apologizing for her aggressive approach, she doubled down with a smirk that revealed her true intentions. "Well, Jennifer, I think our viewers deserve honest conversations, not just promotional fluff. If you can't handle real questions about your public persona, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews." The condescension in Kelly's voice was so thick, it was practically dripping from her words. She had just accused one of the most successful entertainers in the world of being unable to handle real journalism, all while disguising her personal attacks as legitimate inquiry. The studio audience was now visibly uncomfortable, with several people shifting in their seats and exchanging worried glances. Lopez felt something snap inside her. She had endured decades of criticism, scrutiny, and unfair treatment from the media, but she had always maintained her professionalism. This was different. This was a deliberate attempt to humiliate her on national television, and she wasn't going to stand for it any longer. "Handle real questions," Lopez repeated, her voice rising slightly as her famous fire began to show. "Meghan, there's a difference between real journalism and what you're doing right now. Real journalists ask tough questions with respect and integrity. What you're doing is trying to create drama for ratings, and frankly, it's beneath both of us." Kelly's eyes lit up with excitement. This was exactly the kind of confrontation she had been hoping for. Controversy meant clips. Clips meant social media buzz. And social media buzz meant ratings. She leaned back in her chair with the satisfaction of someone who had successfully baited their target. "So now I'm not a real journalist?" Kelly shot back, her voice dripping with fake indignation. "I've been doing this for decades, Jennifer. I've interviewed presidents, world leaders, and yes, celebrities who thought they were above being asked difficult questions. The fact that you're getting so defensive tells me I'm asking exactly the right questions." The manipulation in Kelly's response was masterful in its cruelty. She had taken Lopez's legitimate criticism of her unprofessional behavior and turned it into an attack on her credentials, painting herself as the victim while continuing to assault her guest's character and integrity. Lopez leaned forward in her chair, her composure finally beginning to crack after years of media training and professional restraint. "Defensive? Meghan, I'm not being defensive. I'm being honest. You invited me here under the pretense of discussing my work, and instead you're launching personal attacks based on tabloid gossip and your own assumptions about who I am as a person." "Tabloid gossip?" Kelly interrupted, her voice taking on a mocking tone. "I'm talking about documented facts about your lifestyle, your business decisions, your relationships. These aren't assumptions, Jennifer. These are observable patterns of behavior that raise legitimate questions about authenticity. The word authenticity hung in the air like a slap. Kelly had just questioned the very core of Lopez's identity, suggesting that everything she had built, everything she represented, was somehow fake or manufactured. It was a line that should never have been crossed, especially not in what was supposed to be a promotional interview. Lopez stood up suddenly, her chair scraping against the studio floor with a sound that echoed through the now silent studio. The audience gasped, sensing that they were witnessing something unprecedented. In all her years of doing interviews, Lopez had never walked out on anyone, but Kelly had pushed her past every reasonable limit. "You know what, Meghan?" Lopez said, her voice now carrying the full force of her anger and disappointment. "I've sat through thousands of interviews in my career. I've answered difficult questions. I've addressed controversies. I've been honest about my mistakes and my growth as a person. But I have never, and I mean never, sat across from someone who was so determined to be cruel for the sake of entertainment." Kelly realized she might have pushed too far, but her ego wouldn't let her back down. Now, she had committed to this confrontational approach, and admitting she was wrong would mean acknowledging that she had sacrificed basic human decency for the sake of ratings. "Jennifer, please sit down," Kelly said, trying to regain control of the situation while maintaining her aggressive stance. "If you can't handle a challenging interview, how can your fans trust that you're being real with them in your music and your movies?" The question was so loaded with malicious intent that it took Lopez's breath away. Kelly had just suggested that her inability to tolerate being ambushed and attacked on television somehow reflected on her integrity as an artist and performer. It was a connection so illogical and unfair that it revealed the depths of Kelly's determination to destroy her guest's reputation. "Handle a challenging interview," Lopez repeated, her voice now shaking with rage. "Meghan, you're not challenging me. You're trying to humiliate me. There's a huge difference between asking tough questions and what you're doing right now. You're not interested in my answers. You're interested in breaking me down on camera." The studio had fallen completely silent except for the hum of the cameras and lighting equipment. Even the production crew seemed frozen, unsure whether to intervene or let this unprecedented confrontation play out. The audience members looked like they wanted to disappear into their seats, trapped as unwilling witnesses to what felt more like a public execution than an interview. Kelly made one final attempt to justify her behavior while continuing her assault. "I'm asking the questions that your fans want answers to, Jennifer. The questions about whether the person they see on stage and screen is the same person who exists behind closed doors. If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe that says more about you than it does about me." The hypocrisy of the statement was breathtaking. Kelly was claiming to represent Lopez's fans, while simultaneously trying to destroy the very person those fans admired and supported. She was hiding behind the pretense of journalism, while engaging in what could only be described as character assassination. Lopez shook her head in disgust, finally seeing Kelly's true nature with perfect clarity. "You want to know who I really am, Meghan? I'm someone who has worked incredibly hard to build a career based on talent, dedication, and yes, authenticity. I'm someone who has made mistakes and learned from them, who has grown as a person and an artist over the course of decades in this industry. But most importantly, I'm someone who has enough self-respect to not sit here and let you tear me down for your entertainment." She began to remove her microphone, her movements deliberate and dignified despite the chaos Kelly had created. The simple act sent a clear message that this interview was over, that Kelly had finally pushed too far and lost any chance of redemption. Kelly panicked, realizing that her guest was actually preparing to leave. "Jennifer, wait. I think there's been a misunderstanding here. I'm just trying to have an honest conversation about your career and your impact on popular culture." But Lopez was done with Kelly's manipulation and false concern. She had seen enough, heard enough, and endured enough. "No, Meghan, there's no misunderstanding. You know exactly what you're doing, and so do I. You invited me here to promote my work, and instead you decided to use me as a target for whatever personal issues you're dealing with. That's not journalism. That's not entertainment. That's just cruel." The accusation of cruelty hit Kelly like a physical blow, mainly because it was absolutely accurate. She had indeed been cruel, deliberately and calculatingly, all in the name of creating viral content and boosting her show's profile. But instead of acknowledging this truth, she chose to deflect and attack even more viciously. "Personal issues?" Kelly shot back, her voice now openly hostile. Jennifer, the only person with personal issues here, is someone who can't handle basic questions about their public image. Maybe the problem isn't with my journalism. Maybe the problem is that you've been living in a bubble for so long that you've forgotten what real accountability looks like. It was the final straw. Kelly had not only refused to acknowledge her unprofessional behavior, but she had doubled down on her cruelty, attempting to shift the blame entirely onto Lopez. "You know what, Meghan?" Lopez said, her voice now calm, but with an icy edge that cut through the studio. "I feel sorry for you. To be so consumed by bitterness and insecurity that you have to tear others down to feel important. That's a sad way to live." With that, Jennifer Lopez turned and walked off the set, leaving a stunned Meghan Kelly and a silent studio in her wake. The cameras lingered on Kelly's face, capturing her bewildered expression before the show abruptly cut to a commercial break. The internet, of course, exploded. Within minutes, clips of the exchange were going viral, sparking a global debate about journalistic ethics, celebrity privacy, and the true nature of Hollywood's biggest stars. Was Jennifer Lopez right to walk out? Was Meghan Kelly out of line? One thing is for sure. This interview will be remembered as one of the most shocking moments in daytime television history. And the world just got a glimpse of a side of Jennifer Lopez we rarely see. A woman of unwavering integrity, pushed to her absolute limit. What do you think about this shocking confrontation? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more exclusive content like this. If you were as shocked as we were by this interview, hit that like button and share this video with your friends. What are your thoughts on Jennifer Lopez's reaction and Meghan Kelly's questions? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into celebrity drama and untold stories.